The ancient Douglas firs stretched toward the darkening sky like silent sentinels, their massive trunks disappearing into the evening mist that had begun to settle over the Pacific Northwest forest. Marcus Blackwood wiped the sweat from his brow, his calloused hands rough against his weathered skin. 23 years of logging had taught him every sound of these woods, from the gentle creak of swaying branches to the distant call of barred owls. But tonight, something was different. The air carried an unfamiliar electricity, making the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Marcus checked his watch, 7:45 p.m. He should have headed back an hour ago, but the company's deadline for this section loomed, and he needed to finish marking the trees for tomorrow's crew. Just a few more, he muttered to himself, adjusting the orange safety vest that had become a second skin over the years. His boots crunched against the carpet of pine needles as he moved deeper into the old-growth section, spray can in hand. The first anomaly he noticed was the silence. The usual evening chorus of birds had gone quiet, replaced by an almost oppressive stillness. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Marcus paused, his hand instinctively tightening around the can of marking paint. In all his years working these woods, he'd never experienced anything quite like this. Then came the lights. At first, he thought it was just the last rays of sunset filtering through the canopy, but these were different, ethereal ribbons of blue and green that danced between the trees like aurora borealis brought down to earth. Marcus stood transfixed, his heart pounding against his ribs as the lights began to coalesce into a singular, pulsing sphere about 20 feet ahead. "I must be more tired than I thought," he whispered, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew this was no hallucination. The sphere cast shadows that moved against the natural fall of the evening light, and the air around it seemed to shimmer like heat waves rising from summer asphalt. His radio crackled to life, making him jump. "Marcus, you still out there?" It was Ruby Martinez, the site supervisor, her voice tinged with concern. "It's getting dark, and there's a storm system moving in." Marcus reached for the radio, but before he could respond, the sphere began to change. It expanded, stretching and morphing until it took on a vaguely humanoid shape. He stood rooted to the spot, every instinct screaming at him to run, yet something deeper, more primal, urged him to stay. The form continued to solidify, and as it did, Marcus realized he was witnessing something that would forever change his understanding of reality. Where moments ago there had been only light, now stood a figure that seemed both perfectly human and utterly alien at the same time. She, for the being appeared feminine, stood about 7 feet tall, with skin that seemed to shift between pale blue and silvery white, like moonlight on water. Her eyes were large and almond-shaped, containing what looked like swirling galaxies. Long, silver-white hair floated around her head as if suspended in water, despite the still air. "Marcus Blackwood," she spoke, her voice resonating not through the air but directly in his mind, carrying notes of ancient wisdom and gentle authority. "I am Lyra, and I have been watching you." The radio crackled again. "Marcus? Do you copy?" His hands trembling, Marcus lifted the radio. "I'm here, Ruby. Just finishing up. I'll head back soon." He never took his eyes off the being before him. Lyra moved closer, her movements fluid and graceful, barely disturbing the forest floor. "Your world stands at a crossroads, Marcus Blackwood, and these ancient guardians," she gestured to the towering trees around them, "hold secrets that could determine your planet's future." Marcus found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. What are you?" A smile played across Lyra's luminescent features. "I am a guardian, like these trees, though from much further away than you can imagine. My people have watched Earth for millennia, particularly its forests, for they are more than just collections of trees, they are living libraries, holding knowledge that spans ages." She reached out, touching a nearby Douglas fir. Where her hand met bark, patterns of light spread outward like ripples in a pond. "These beings you call trees are connected in ways your science is only beginning to understand. They communicate, they remember, and they hold wisdom that could help prevent the catastrophes that threaten your world. Marcus watched in amazement as the light continued to pulse through the tree's bark, revealing intricate patterns that seemed to tell stories he couldn't quite comprehend. Why are you showing me this? Because you have something rare among your kind, Marcus, a true connection to these forests. Despite your role in their harvesting, you understand their importance. You feel their loss when they fall. And now, you are needed to help protect them. The mist had grown thicker around them, creating an ethereal chamber that seemed to exist outside of normal time and space. In the distance, thunder rolled, but it felt muffled, as if from another world entirely. I don't understand, Marcus said, taking a step closer. What could I possibly do? I'm just a logger. Lyra's expression softened. You are far more than just anything, Marcus Blackwood. Your position gives you influence over which trees are taken and which are spared. But more importantly, your connection to this forest makes you ideal for what must come next. She raised her hand, and the air between them filled with three-dimensional images, holographic representations of forest systems, showing networks of roots and mycelia that pulsed with life and information. Your world faces challenges that will require cooperation not just between nations, but between species. The trees hold answers to questions your people haven't even thought to ask yet. But time grows short, and the ancient ones are falling faster than they can be replaced. Marcus looked at his marking can, then back at the magnificent being before him. The company has quotas. Deadlines. I can't just stop doing my job. I am not asking you to stop, Lyra replied, her voice carrying notes of understanding. I am asking you to become something more, a bridge between your world and mine, between humanity's needs and the forest's wisdom. Will you listen to what I have to share? Before Marcus could respond, a brilliant flash of lightning illuminated the forest, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder. When his vision cleared, Lyra remained, but she had become slightly translucent, like morning mist in sunlight. Our time grows short, she said, her voice taking on an urgent tone. The storm approaches, and others of your kind draw near. But if you are willing, I can show you things that will change your understanding of these forests forever. Will you help us, Marcus Blackwood? The radio buzzed again, more insistent this time. Marcus, storm's hitting hard. You need to get back to the station now. He looked at the radio, then back at Lyra. In that moment, Marcus Blackwood, veteran logger, practical man, and lifelong skeptic, made a decision that would alter not only his life but potentially the future of two worlds. Yes, he said, his voice firm despite his racing heart. Show me everything. Lyra's smile brightened, literally, casting a soft glow through the misty darkness. Then let us begin, she said, extending her hand toward him. But remember, Marcus Blackwood, what you learn from this point forward will make you both more and less than what you were. Are you prepared for that? Thunder rolled again, closer now, and fat raindrops began to fall through the canopy. Marcus took one last look at the marking can in his hand, then let it fall to the forest floor. He reached out toward Lyra's offered hand, and as their fingers met, the world around him transformed into something both beautiful and terrifying, a reality where the line between earth and sky, between solid and spirit, between known and unknown, blurred into infinity. The forest bore witness to this moment, this connection between worlds, as the storm raged overhead and the ancient trees swayed in the wind, their branches reaching toward a sky that suddenly seemed much closer than before. The moment Marcus's hand touched Lyra's, reality itself seemed to fold like origami. The rainy forest dissolved around them, replaced by what appeared to be an observation chamber carved from living crystal. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed along its walls, creating an ever-shifting tapestry of light and shadow. Welcome to the Nexus, Lyra said, her form now solid and radiant in this new environment. This is where we study and monitor Earth's forests from our ship, currently stationed in high orbit. Marcus staggered slightly, his logger's boots making no sound on the seemingly crystalline floor. "I'm in space?" His voice cracked with disbelief. In a manner of speaking, Lyra replied, gesturing to what appeared to be windows but were actually high-definition displays showing various forest ecosystems from around the world. "This is a projection chamber, connected to your physical form through quantum entanglement. Your body remains in the forest, protected by a temporal field, while your consciousness experiences this reality." Before Marcus could process this information, one of the displays expanded, showing a three-dimensional view of Earth's entire forest system. It was like looking at the planet's nervous system, countless green lines interconnected, pulsing with life and information. "Your people call it the Wood Wide Web," Lyra explained, manipulating the hologram with graceful movements. "But it's far more complex than your scientists have discovered. These forests don't just share nutrients and information, they store memories, histories, and knowledge spanning millions of years." The display zoomed in on the Pacific Northwest, where Marcus could see his own forest glowing with particular intensity. "This is why we chose you, Marcus. Your section of the forest contains some of the oldest living libraries on Earth." "Libraries?" Marcus watched as individual trees lit up like beacons. "You mean the trees actually store information?" Lyra nodded, her galactic eyes reflecting the shifting lights. "In ways your technology cannot yet comprehend. The mycorrhizal networks beneath your feet are more sophisticated than your most advanced quantum computers. They process and store data about climate changes, species migrations, and even civilizations long forgotten by your kind." She waved her hand, and the chamber filled with images from Earth's past, ancient societies living in harmony with the forests, sophisticated sustainable practices that had been lost to time, and devastating environmental changes that had shaped the planet's history. "My people, the Sylvani, discovered Earth 3,000 years ago," Lyra continued. "We recognize the unique properties of your forests immediately. You see, Marcus, Earth is rare, a planet where biological and quantum processes have merged to create living data networks. Other worlds have forests, but none quite like yours." Marcus watched as another display showed a comparison between Earth's forests and those of other worlds, strange, alien landscapes with vegetation that seemed to defy physics. "Why are you showing me all this?" Lyra's expression grew serious. "Because your world is approaching a tipping point. The ancient forest networks are being severed faster than they can adapt. When a centuries-old tree falls, it's not just a loss of timber, it's the loss of irreplaceable data that could hold solutions to problems your species hasn't even encountered yet." She brought up another display, showing projections of Earth's future, some beautiful, others devastating. "We've seen this pattern before, on other worlds. Some recovered, finding balance between progress and preservation. Others..." She didn't need to finish the sentence, the images spoke for themselves. "But what can I do?" Marcus asked, his logger's pragmatism wrestling with the cosmic scale of what he was learning. "I'm just one person, and these companies, these industries, they're not going to stop because one man tells them about alien tree networks." Lyra smiled, and for a moment, her form shifted, showing glimpses of her true nature, a being of pure energy and thought, choosing to appear humanoid for his comfort. "We don't expect you to stop the harvest, Marcus. That would be both impossible and unwise. Your civilization needs resources to progress. What we need is balance, and more importantly, understanding." She led him to another section of the chamber, where something that looked like a seed floated in a column of light. "This is a quantum resonator, adapted to work with Earth's biology. When planted near a logging site, it helps the surrounding trees redistribute their stored information before they're harvested, ensuring no knowledge is lost." Marcus reached out toward the seed, then hesitated. "Is this legal? I mean, by your laws?" "We operate under strict non-interference protocols," Lyra explained. "These resonators use Earth's own biological systems, we're simply helping them work more efficiently." Think of it as giving the forests tools to protect themselves. Suddenly, alerts flashed across several displays. Lyra's expression shifted to one of concern. Something's wrong. The temporal field. She quickly moved to what appeared to be a control panel. Your colleagues are searching for you. The storm has intensified, and they're worried. How long have I been here? Marcus asked, realizing he'd lost all sense of time in this strange place. Time moves differently in the Nexus, Lyra replied, her form beginning to fade slightly. We must return you, but first. She retrieved the resonator seed and pressed it into his hand. It felt warm and seemed to pulse in sync with his heartbeat. Plant this near the next harvest site. Watch what happens. And Marcus? Her eyes locked with his. Remember, you're not alone in this anymore. We will be watching, waiting, ready to share more when you're prepared. The crystalline chamber began to dissolve around them, the displays flickering out one by one. Wait! Marcus called out. There's so much more I need to know. Knowledge comes in stages, Marcus Blackwood, Lyra's voice echoed as reality began to reshape itself. Too much at once can be as dangerous as too little. Watch for the signs. Listen to the forests. They will tell you when it's time for more. The world spun, twisted, and then snapped back into focus. Marcus found himself back in the forest, the storm raging overhead, his clothes soaked with rain. His radio was squawking urgently, and flashlight beams cut through the darkness nearby. Marcus! Answer if you can hear us. Ruby's voice carried over the wind. He looked down at his hand, where the resonator seed glowed faintly before fading to look like any ordinary seed. In the distance, he could see the search party approaching, their lights bobbing through the trees. Over here, he called out, tucking the seed securely in his pocket. As he waited for his colleagues to reach him, Marcus looked up at the ancient trees swaying in the storm. They seemed different now, not just lumber to be harvested, but sentinels guarding secrets he was only beginning to understand. A flash of blue-green light in the clouds caught his eye, and for a moment, he thought he saw a massive shape moving against the storm, something that defied explanation, something that shouldn't exist in his rational, orderly world. Then it was gone, leaving him with nothing but questions, a mysterious seed, and the weight of knowledge that would change everything. 3 weeks after his encounter in the storm, Marcus stood before the largest Douglas fir in Section 7, studying the results of his secret experiment. The resonator seed he'd planted had sprouted overnight, producing what appeared to be a small, innocuous fern. But through the specialized lenses Lyra had somehow slipped into his truck's glove compartment, he could see the quantum network it had created, threads of blue-green light connecting dozens of trees in an intricate web. The corporate timber survey lay heavy in his back pocket. Northwest Lumber's plans for clear-cutting Section 7 had been accelerated, scheduled to begin in just 5 days. The machinery would arrive tomorrow. You're sure about these readings? Ruby Martinez's voice made him jump. She stood a few feet away, frowning at her tablet. These core samples don't match anything in our database. Marcus's heart raced. The resonator was affecting the trees in ways he hadn't anticipated. Maybe the equipment needs recalibration, he suggested, trying to keep his voice steady. Ruby shook her head, her dark hair catching the morning sunlight. I've checked twice. These trees. She walked up to the massive Douglas fir, placing her hand on its bark. They're showing cellular structures I've never seen before. Almost like they're. Like they're what? Evolving. She turned to face him. Marcus, what's really going on here? First the strange lights during the storm, then your disappearance, and now this? You've been different since that night. Before he could respond, a low rumble filled the air. Both foresters looked up to see 3 black helicopters passing overhead, unmarked except for small government seals on their sides. That's the 3rd flyover this week, Ruby noted. Someone up high is very interested in our little forest. Marcus watched the helicopters disappear over the ridgeline, remembering Lyra's warnings about maintaining secrecy. The weight of his knowledge pressed down on him like a physical force. A sharp crack echoed through the trees. Ruby's tablet had slipped from her hands, its screen spider-webbed with cracks. But Marcus barely noticed, he was transfixed by what was happening to the ancient Douglas fir. Where Ruby's hand still touched its bark, patterns of light pulsed outward, visible even without the special lenses. Her eyes widened as the pattern spread, forming symbols and images that seemed to float just beneath the bark's surface. Marcus? Her voice trembled. Please tell me you're seeing this too. Before he could respond, the forest around them erupted with activity. Every tree connected to the resonator's network began to glow, creating a vast web of living light. Images flickered through the canopy, glimpses of ancient histories, lost civilizations, and something more, something that made Ruby stumble backward with a gasp. Those aren't trees, she whispered. They're some kind of biological supercomputers. The sound of approaching vehicles cut through the moment. Through the trees, Marcus could see dust rising from the access road, more government vehicles approaching. Ruby grabbed his arm. Marcus, whatever's going on, whatever you know, you need to tell me now. Because those people? She nodded toward the approaching vehicles. They're not here for timber surveys. Marcus looked at his colleague of 8 years, seeing the same mix of fear and wonder he'd felt during his first encounter with Lyra. In that moment, he made a decision that would either save the forest or destroy everything he'd been trying to protect. Ruby, he said, pulling the alien lenses from his pocket, what I'm about to show you, it changes everything. The forest seemed to hold its breath as Marcus began to speak, sharing the truth about Lyra, the Sylvani, and humanity's place in a much larger universe. With each word, the resonator's network pulsed stronger, as if the forest itself was choosing sides in what was about to become a race against time, to save not just these trees, but the ancient knowledge they contained. As government agents began to emerge from their vehicles at the forest's edge, Marcus and Ruby stood beneath the ancient Douglas fir, now the center of a decision that would ripple across 2 worlds. The truth was out, but whether it would lead to salvation or disaster remained to be seen. Through it all, high above Earth's atmosphere, Lyra watched from her ship, knowing that the next few hours would determine not just the fate of this forest, but potentially the future of human-Sylvani relations. The game of secrets was ending, the time for choices had begun. The government agents moved through the forest like shadows in dark suits, their equipment beeping softly as they took readings. Marcus and Ruby watched from their hiding spot behind a massive fallen log, the alien lenses revealing the invisible network of light that now connected nearly every tree in Section 7. Agent Reynolds, one of the men, called out, his handheld device flashing red. We've got quantum signatures unlike anything in our database. They match the patterns from the Siberian incident. The lead agent, a tall woman with steel-gray hair, approached the ancient Douglas fir. Seal off the perimeter. No one gets in or out without clearance. She pressed her hand against the bark, exactly where Ruby had touched it earlier. Nothing happened. The trees, Ruby whispered to Marcus. They're choosing who to respond to. Marcus nodded, remembering Lyra's words about the forest's consciousness. The quantum resonator hadn't just created a network, it had awakened something that had been dormant for millennia. A low hum filled the air as more vehicles arrived. Through gaps in the canopy, Marcus could see military trucks rolling in, carrying what looked like heavy scientific equipment. His phone vibrated, a text from Northwest Lumber's corporate office, urgent, clear-cutting of Section 7 postponed indefinitely by federal order. Stand by for further instructions. They're going to turn this place into a research facility, Ruby said, her voice tight with concern. Everything the trees have been protecting will be exposed. A flash of blue-green light rippled through the quantum network, and suddenly Marcus heard Lyra's voice in his mind, "The time has come, Marcus. The forest has made its choice. The ground trembled slightly, and the government agent's equipment began to spark and malfunction. The ancient Douglas fir started to pulse with inner light, visible even to the naked eye. All units, fall back. Agent Reynolds ordered, but it was too late. The forest erupted into a symphony of light and energy. Every tree connected to the network began projecting images into the air, not just of Earth's past, but of other worlds, other civilizations, the vast tapestry of life throughout the galaxy. Marcus stood up, despite Ruby's attempt to pull him back. "Wait," he said. "This is what's supposed to happen." The agent stood frozen, weapons drawn but useless against the spectacular display above them. Agent Reynolds turned slowly, her eyes meeting Marcus's as he emerged from hiding. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, unsurprised. "We've been expecting you to surface eventually. Ever since our satellites detected the quantum anomaly during that storm." "Then you know what this place really is," Marcus replied, walking forward. Ruby appeared beside him, the alien lenses in her hand catching the ethereal light. "We suspected," Reynolds admitted. "After similar incidents in other ancient forests around the world. But we never had proof until now." She holstered her weapon. "The question is, what happens next?" The air shimmed, and Lyra materialized between Marcus and the agents, her form more solid than he'd ever seen it. Several agents raised their weapons again, but Reynolds held up her hand. "I am Lyra of the Sylvani," she announced, her voice echoing both in their minds and in the air. "And we need to talk about the future of this planet." What followed was a conversation that would reshape humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. For hours, as the forest continued its display of cosmic knowledge, Lyra explained the true purpose of Earth's forests, not just as ecosystems, but as part of an interstellar network of living databases. The quantum resonator had activated an ancient protocol, forcing the revelation that humanity had long been ready for but had never stumbled upon. The trees themselves had made the decision, choosing this moment to bridge the gap between worlds. As night fell, temporary floodlights cast strange shadows through the forest. Scientists had replaced soldiers, their instruments recording data that would take years to fully understand. Marcus watched as Ruby worked with them, her forestry expertise proving invaluable in interpreting the tree's responses. "This isn't quite how we planned it," Lyra said, appearing beside him in a more subtle form. "Plans change," Marcus replied, touching the bark of a nearby cedar. "The forest chose its own path." "Indeed." Lyra's form flickered slightly. "But the hard part is just beginning. Your people now know about us, about the true nature of these forests. The question is, what will they do with this knowledge?" Marcus looked at the scientists working below, then up at the stars barely visible through the canopy. Somewhere up there, a Sylvani ship waited, watching humanity's first steps into a larger universe. "We'll do better," he said firmly. "We have to. The forests have given us a chance to be part of something greater than ourselves. We can't waste it." The quantum network pulsed once more, as if in agreement, sending echoes of light through the ancient trees that had waited so long to share their secrets. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, humanity wasn't facing it alone. 1 year after the revelation in Section 7, Marcus stood before the United Nations Environmental Council, the quantum resonator seed now a small pendant around his neck. The chamber was packed with delegates from every nation, all eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the world's forest coverage. The Sylvani Human Forestry Initiative has successfully integrated quantum resonators into 17 major forest systems, he reported, as green lights pulsed across the map. "We're not just preserving trees anymore, we're preserving the greatest library of knowledge humanity has ever encountered." Ruby, now director of Xenobotanical Research, stepped forward to present the latest findings. The past year had transformed her from a local forester into one of Earth's leading experts on alien-forest interactions. Each activated forest node has revealed unprecedented information about Earth's history and potential future, she explained. The trees aren't just storing data, they're processing it, analyzing climate patterns and ecological changes in real time. In the chamber's upper gallery, Lyra watched in her humanoid form, now an official ambassador of the Sylvani Council. Her presence still drew stares, but humanity was adapting to the reality of alien allies faster than anyone had expected. The disclosure hadn't been without consequences. Religious institutions grappled with theological implications. Corporations scrambled to adapt to new sustainable harvesting regulations. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was all an elaborate hoax. But the forests themselves provided undeniable proof. Under the resonator's influence, they displayed their knowledge in ways that could no longer be ignored or hidden. Ancient groves became living universities, where scientists and mystics alike came to learn from Earth's oldest inhabitants. The choice before us is simple, Marcus continued, his voice carrying the weight of experience. We can continue viewing our forests as resources to be consumed, or we can embrace our role as custodians of something far greater. The Sylvani have offered us membership in the Interstellar Forest Network, but that membership depends on how we proceed from here. The chamber erupted in discussion. On the main screen, another forest node activated in Brazil, its quantum signature joining the growing network of enlightened ecosystems. Later that evening, Marcus stood in a small grove behind the UN building, a modest space that had become Earth's first urban quantum forest. Lyra materialized beside him, her form shimmering in the twilight. "You've exceeded all our expectations," she said, watching the quantum patterns flow between the trees. "When we first chose you, some on our council doubted that a logger could become the bridge between our worlds." Marcus smiled, touching the resonator pendant. "I still cut trees," he reminded her. "The difference is now we understand their sacrifice. Every harvest is planned with the network in mind, ensuring no knowledge is lost. And that understanding has changed everything." Lyra gestured to a young sapling, barely taller than Marcus. "This one contains data about water purification techniques from 3 different civilizations. The old way would have seen it as nothing but future lumber." A soft chime emanated from Lyra's form, a communication from the Sylvani ship. "The Council has voted," she announced, her eyes shimmering with stellar light. "Earth's application has been accepted. You are now officially part of the network." Marcus felt the resonator warm against his chest as the news rippled through Earth's quantum forest system. Around the world, trees lit up with celebratory patterns, sharing the moment across continents. "So what happens now?" he asked, watching the young sapling pulse with newfound energy. "Now?" Lyra's form began to shift, showing more of her true self than ever before. "Now we begin the real work. Your world has taken its first steps into a larger community of worlds. The forests will guide you, as they have guided others before you." She turned to face him fully. "But first, there's something you need to see." With a gesture, she opened a portal similar to the one that had first taken him to the Nexus. The Interstellar Forest Network is holding its first full assembly in a millennium, and Earth's representatives are expected to attend. Through the portal, Marcus could see impossible trees on impossible worlds, their quantum networks stretching across light years. Ruby emerged from the UN building just in time to see the display. "Ready for another adventure?" she asked, joining them at the portal's edge. Marcus looked back at the small grove, now eternally changed by humanity's growth. The trees swayed gently in the evening breeze, their ancient wisdom finally recognized and respected. "You know," he said, stepping toward the portal, "I think we're all ready." As they passed through the quantum gateway, the Earth's forests continued their age-old dance of light and knowledge, no longer alone in their mission to preserve the wisdom of ages. They had waited millennia for humanity to understand their true purpose, and now, at last, their patience had been rewarded. The legacy of light would continue, spanning worlds and species, connecting life across the vast expanse of space, one forest at a time.